Si je pende de gojongwede, to desambe nobi nama.
And I want to say one other thing. Some of you may have seen in the New York Times recently some statement by Nicholas Kristof, who usually is reasonable, but he is badly influenced by the nasty Melvin Goldstein, an anthropologist who is on the China side, unfortunately. And they are proclaiming, oh, Dalai Lama said he will live under Communist Party of Tibet. He's a great statesman. That's ridiculous. That is totally ridiculous. The Dalai Lama will never surrender to the Communist Party of Tibet and let them just rule Tibet the way they are ruling it. Because they're destroying Tibet, and his whole object is to save Tibet and save Tibetan culture and so on. So he will never surrender. You should never feel discouraged that you're abandoned by the Dalai Lama. His Holiness will never abandon you. He will never abandon the Tibetan people. That is a totally fake thing they said. What they said, notice that they didn't quote His Holiness directly. What they said was, they said, would he consider being under the Chinese Communist Party? Well, the middle way proposal, then he said yes, he would consider, because he wants to negotiate with no preconditions, but he's always said the Tibetan people will vote to decide the final decision, not himself, A, and so it will be up to you to make the vote, and the Tibetans in Tibet. And B, when his middle way proposal is a proposal that Tibet has genuine autonomy with its own self-government, one country, two systems like Hong Kong, with democracy in Tibet, and the Tibetan people controlling their own environment and economy and religion and culture and daily life, and no Chinese police, and no Chinese colonists, and no Chinese people sitting on top of their heads and standing on their necks. He will never accept that. But of course, because of the middle way, he says, then the Chinese, however, if they gave such a real autonomy and got their troops out of Tibet, got their colonists out of Tibet, then we would still be part of China. And the Communist Party is still ruling China. So in that sense, yes, the Communist Party has something to say, like they do in Hong Kong. But they can't interfere too much, and their troops cannot interfere with Tibetan citizens. That's the most important. They cannot shoot monks, they cannot beat up the citizens. People can say, long live the Dalai Lama. People can raise the Tibetan flag. People can live their own life without a bunch of Chinese living on top of them, is the point. No soldiers, no colonists, no Chinese whorehouses. They will live like free Tibetans again. But he did concede that this could be part of China. That is correct. So what they mentioned in the newspaper article is only repeating what Dalai Lama has long said for 20 years. It's nothing new. But when he says under Chinese Communist Party, that means as a free democracy like Hong Kong, with a different law internally, with freedom for the people internally. Please don't forget that. Don't get confused by the people who shout independence at any cost, who are unrealistically thinking that they can somehow fight such a huge army and such a huge country with no support from anyone in the world. That is not possible. So those people are simply confused. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness's request of genuine autonomy within a union with China is something truly revolutionary. It means a truly free Tibet. And of course it doesn't hope or intend or promise to remove the Communist Party in China. That the Chinese have to do. That's the Chinese business. He can't do that. So he can say, yes, we'll consider the Chinese Communist Party. Do you understand the difference? I hope you understand what I explained, because it's very important that you don't think His Holiness in any way is abandoning Tibetan freedom. He is only seeking Tibetan freedom in a realistic way within, like a Hong Kong freedom, within that. And we know, you know, Tibetans know for 60 years that the Chinese treaties, Chinese promises are not to be trusted. They have broken them again and again. And the people who are now ruling China, and especially the ones they have put in Tibet, who are like cultural revolutionaries 40, 50 years ago, who would never be given charge of any other part of China, but they're putting them there to genocide the Tibetan people. Obviously, that's well known, and you know that. But the point is, if they would ever talk to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, if they would ever acknowledge that there is a problem in Tibet, if they would realize that for 50 years, the Tibetans have continued to resist them and will always resist them for 5 centuries if necessary, When they realize that, then they might make a deal that would be realistic. And that is what the Dalai Lama is doing. That is a deal for Tibetan freedom. That is a deal for the Tibetan flag. It's within a union, like the European Union, common market. We're in a new century now. We're not in the old century of imperialism. We're in the new century. And in that century, His Holiness's plan is absolutely realistic. So therefore, you can say, China out of Tibet, free Tibet, long live Tibet, China get back down where you belong off of the high plateau, and not just Tibet Autonomous Region, but Amdo and Kham as well, as one great unit, Great Tibet, the Chembo, should be free. You can say that, and you will be with the Dalai Lama, and yet the Dalai Lama does concede this has to be done within the Union, like a European Union. Then, of course, why China will never talk to him? Because they feel if they give independence in that way within their union, then the Uyghur people in Xinjiang will demand that, the Mongolian people in Inner Mongolia will demand that, and the Manchurian people within Manchuria will demand that, and they're very afraid of that. And then finally, the worst thing they're really afraid of, you know who they're really afraid of? Not you. They're not afraid of you. They're not afraid of Tibetans. They're afraid of their own Chinese people. Their own Chinese people want freedom too. Everybody wants freedom in the planet. So they know that the Tibetans are actually leading the whole of Asia toward freedom non-violently, with total courage and with total moral high ground because of the non-violence. And knowing that, you are a great threat to them, yes. Without your guns, oh, they would love it if the Tibetans did some violence. If any violence Tibetan would do, they would immediately attack violently, 10 times worse than they do now, and they would be justified in the eyes of the world. It is the non-violence that gives you your power and your strength. And therefore it's the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama that gives your power and your strength. And don't ever listen to any other BS from anybody. All right? So long live the Dalai Lama! Long live Tibet! Freedom for Tibet! Freedom for Mongolia! Freedom for Uiguria! Freedom for Manchuria! And freedom for China! Freedom for China! We are for China, the Chinese people! We just don't like the criminal, communist, criminal gang that currently suppresses China and Tibet. So they are the ones who have to have regime change. But the Chinese people have to do that. We have to negotiate with them somehow and hope that finally they will get someone who has a little bit of common sense and who will therefore realize the Dalai Lama is everybody's best friend if they would only be friendly to him. It is just incredibly foolish, in fact it is insane, to make a person like the Dalai Lama into an enemy. He is everyone's good friend, all right? So that's all I have to say, besides congratulating you for standing here for 164 days, and we will be here for 100 years all together, if necessary, life after life, okay? Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Si je pende de gojovede, tu de sambe nobi nama.